Hello and welcome back to RageGamingVideos, and of course a new Elden Ring tier list video. Last week we took a look at the great swords of the game and rated them basically the best ones compared to each other, and I asked what other weapon type would you like to see. Something that came up before we really get into that though is obviously the legendary armaments, the legendary weapons of this game, of which there are some really cool designs, some cool mechanics, some not so functional or good mechanics that we should probably rate. Now there's only 9 of them, so it shouldn't take us too long, so we're going to work our way from the bottom to the top. Here we have S, A, B and C, and we'll start from the bottom at C with our first weapon, the Eclipse Shotel. For this one, visually, it's literally just a Shotel with the fire design coming off the back of the blade. I wouldn't say it's the most inspired design, but it does look neat, especially when you actually use the Ash of War and get it all flamed up. Mechanically, the unique aspect is the Ash of War, Death Flare, where you set the weapons on fire with a buff and it now inflicts death damage each hit, which when fully stacked up will instantly kill those afflicted by it. There's one small issue with that concept, it's that it only works on Tarnished, meaning players in PvP only, or specific NPCs in PvE, which is far and few between. And this obviously limits the weapon and its potential so aggressively in PvE that it's really not worth running there because of it. Whereas in PvP, this is still viable. It still has that curved sword moveset, which is incredible in power stance, especially the running attacks together. I found myself a bit shocked and impressed by just the basic damage you can deal with the double buff weapons. Like 800 per running attack combo is solid. Naturally, your range on the weapon attacks is small though, and your poise damage is going to be very low, so trading is hard against those with higher poise, and that's a lot of people in PvP in this patch. The Ash does have a second part, a follow-up input, where after you buff, you bring the weapon down, causing a sort of explosion of that death magic around you, but it's very unlikely to work. The range of that is small, and it's so interruptible, as I've found. Overall, it works fine as a curved sword, and the threat of true death is obviously there, but the status was so heavily knocked down after exploits in the early days of Elden Ring, and then accidentally as part of reducing, say, bleed status build up, it just doesn't really happen. So it can be good, but it's not meta relevant, that's for sure, much like our other weapon down in C, that being of course the Devourer's Scepter. Visually, this is a really cool hammer. It's a skull on a stick with those little hands grasping up, all wrapped around by a giant snake that's consuming the head, which is obviously a reference to Rykard and his lore. It's cool. The weapon type, Great Hammer, isn't great. As much as its attack speed has been improved over the patches to give it reliable standing combos now, there are just better weapon types with better output. You may as well be using a colossal weapon basically. Meanwhile, the Ash is very expensive on FP for what it is, and very small damage per target. It steals a bit of health for yourself. On the bright side, the Ash has very good range around you in a circle, much like the Moog Spear, but in PvP I just find the weapon weak. Its basics are nice and fast, but the damage is low. Whatever weapon of this type you use, it's always not going to be great. However, in this case, you have the fire damage aspect, so that's very buffable, but the Ash, as much as it's got great range and some potential for funny moments in free-for-all, all it's really going to do is clip people for a very small amount of damage and maybe restore a bit of health to you. The lifesteal aspect of it really only works when you got a lot of people in it, which can happen in the open world of PvE Elden Ring, and in that case you do get a lot of health back, but even then the damage you're dealing is so small. Weak legendaries like this confuse me. Why isn't the scaling better, or why doesn't it have a unique moveset? You could give this one like a single target lifesteal attack, maybe a grab using the snake, and then maybe use a heavy and then that's the AoE. But I guess it does have some relevance in PvE where Eclipse really doesn't, so between the two, I guess it's the better option overall. But now we move up to the B grade where we only have one weapon, the Grafted Blade Greatsword. The visuals for this are great. It's a horde of swords melted and molded into this one big sword, a very cool design reminding me of the throne in Game of Thrones. Sadly, it's one of the worst colossal sword options because it just doesn't have great scaling at B on strength, and it's got a set Ash of War that's not that relevant. Other colossal weapons, say neutral ones, can have affinity changes, meaning you can get much better AR for your stats, and any Ash you'd like Lion's Claw or Giant's Hunt ideally, because those are insane. This one stuck with its self buff, which does give you some extra stats and resistances, but mainly relevant for its extra poise, which is very nice, making it for effective trading in PvP. So as a weapon, it's not bad, especially with the colossal sword buffs that were across the board, improving the poise and the attack speed. Even the crouch poke was buffed after its over nerf, so it's in a more reasonable state. So you can do okay with this weapon. The problem here is the lack of potential. Compared to other colossal swords in the game, it can't reach the very strong levels the others can. It's always just going to be fine. But compared to the other two weapons we've talked about so far, it performs better. It'll work okay in PvE and PvP. So B grade seems fair to me. But now we move up to the A tier section. We'll start with the Bolt of Gransax, which is honestly one of the best, if not the best, spear options in the game. It's got a really cool design, a spear sort of wrapped around by this physical lightning, and it is a physical lightning spear. Interestingly, it requires no faith at all, just a bit of strength and then mostly dex, and it is in fact a great dex option as well. Considering you do not need any faith to use this thing, its Ash of War has you jump up in the air and throw a bolt of lightning, which is incredible, dealing great damage, basically the weapon's AR, and flying far and super fast, making it great in PvP for duels where you're interrupting someone trying to cast something, or free-for-all where you're off screen and just spamming it. And in general, what an incredible utility to have in PvE, open world or boss fights. As a weapon in its output, it's honestly really, really good. You've got the power stance version where we can hit super fast, super often, building up successive hits and dealing great counter damage as well. The problem with a thrusting weapon like this, and counter damage specifically, is that was nerfed in PvP, so it's not what it once was, and I do feel it occasionally where I could have traded or won a duel, but I'm just not doing as much damage as I used to. So as a good weapon overall, doing what it does, which is simply long-range lightning damage with thrust-based moveset, it's very good, but it never really reaches like crazy DPS level, as the moveset does slow down after like the second hit. It's just a very strong, solid pick, and you will see it occasionally in PvP because of that. Much like the next weapon, the Ruins Greatsword, which is actually a colossal sword. As a colossal sword, it is a very, very good pick. A little bit of intelligence is required for this one, but in return you do get that unique heavy where you slam down, do this sort of gravity AoE around you, costing no FP at all, which is awesome. But more importantly, its Ash of War is insane. It's like the Blasphemous Blade Ash of War. Long range, wide as hell, knocks enemies down, deals great damage, and just goes through so many targets. It's a proper like pack cleaner, and you can entirely rely on just spamming that Ash even in PvE, so it's very good. Then also it is a colossal sword, as we talked about earlier. They're great, they've been made better. Overall, it's a great weapon type. I really like it, especially with the range and power behind them. And now they feel much like what they should, you know, slower, heavy hitting, big stagger weapons. This is a top tier pick for that. But compared to the ridiculous potential of our S tier picks, I think a high A is where it belongs. Alright, next is the Sword of Night and Flame, which was arguably the best PvE weapon in the game at the launch of Elden Ring, and speedrunners were spamming this thing. It's super cool in its simplistic design, and you can hold the Ash of War to either fire a laser with a light attack or spread fire in a wide arc with a heavy attack. That works great in PvP, especially in free-for-all, where you're catching multiple targets, especially off-screen. It can work in duels where you're power stancing these things and using them as just powerful straight swords, looking to get those ashes off whenever you can. But the laser part is very unlikely to actually go off. It takes a bit of time and it's very dodgeable, but maybe in free-for-all, yeah. In PvE, it is not what it once was, but it is still very strong and entirely viable good weapon to go for. It may have been like the strongest at one point, now it's just a great pick. Choosing to laser and spam that as much as you can, or spread out the fire for AoE or those that are weak to fire in those scenarios. Still a great weapon then, and that's why I think it deserves to still be A tier. Last for A tier on the legendary armaments though, I'm going to go for the Golden Order Greatsword, which I really like, and it's in a really good place now when they made the Ash of War much faster. That two-part Ash of War where you blast around you in holy light and then shoot out the arc, that now comes out much quicker, and that has made a world of difference, making this weapon shoot from just not good enough to very good. It also has really high knockdown for some reason, so in PvP it's really funny sending that out, but the problem here is that because you have to do the AoE around you before you get that arcing sort of throw or ranged attack, it's very predictable and easy to avoid when you see that coming. So yeah, really good in free-for-all or off target, more like the other ones, but in duels, you're really not going to see that land unless someone makes a pretty big mistake. In PvE, where holy damage is relevant, it's top tier because of that, entirely relying on the Ash of War, but it is a great sword which you can use in power stance, maybe in combination with another holy great sword like Blasphemous Blade, and there you've got an incredible setup where you're swapping between them depending on what you need. So it is a top tier weapon, but it obviously has issues and weaknesses, and as cool as its design is, I just don't think this is S tier. But now we are at our S tier in the tier list, so let's get it out of the way. These two are obvious. Firstly, the Darkmoon Greatsword is insane. I love this version of the Moonlight, icy with these like veins running through the middle, and when buffed up, obviously you get access to the classic arc of the Moonlight sword. You can either tap it or hold it, and you'll send out that arc, and that means you can play some real mind games in PvP, which is basically the fundamentals of using this weapon. The damage it will do is going to be incredible, especially on a fully charged hit. In PvE, you can absolutely stack talismans and physics and different things to get that be as powerful as possible, dealing somewhere between 5,000 or 6,000 damage per charged heavy attack as a ranged attack, which costs no FP to do. It's ridiculous. It's genuinely one of the strongest weapons in the game, in my opinion, and a fantastic weapon in general when it comes to legendary armaments. So I'm a huge fan of it, and that is why I think it's S tier. But for our last S tier option, I believe it's the best. Marais' Executioner Sword is that iconic weapon that you see the Hunter follow you around and attack you with. While we don't have access to the amazing telekinetic combos that he does, we do have the Corkscrew, which is arguably the best DPS option we could have looked for anyway. When it comes to PvE with this thing, you're gonna burn through health pools absolutely outrageously quick if you are running a successive build, which you should. As the Corkscrew occurs, it ticks and ticks and ticks in damage, successive hits go off, your AR shoots up. If you can get 2 of these ashes off back to back, most anything will just be, well, corkscrewed to pieces. If you can't, well, they did make the function of it better, now allowing you to roll out of it should you miss or things go wrong, and that was vital because it was so painful to use that ash and be stuck in it when you've missed. I'm convinced it's the highest DPS weapon in the game because of this, and it also works incredible in PvP now, just down to the fact that you can roll out of the ash. And then you fall back on just a really solid Greatsword when not using that ash. But it would be cool if we could do the full range, or at least more options with the telekinetic combos. Still, in its current form, it is incredible. But there you have it, that's our complete list for the legendary armaments. And they're conveniently placed correctly, so left being the strongest, right being the weakest in each tier. It always surprises me that there's only 9 of these things. It would be cool if we saw some more in the DLC, but I think we probably will. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.